I just feel so privileged to represent the good people of this area, and we have together done a lot of things positive for our district and for our nation. We've rebuilt the military. I've been a strong advocate and as a member of the Armed Services Committee to fully funding our military, making sure they have what they need and increasing funding, and we've achieved that. Last year I passed the Federal Emergency Management Agency reform bill that is requiring them to change the way they provide disaster assistance to victims after a flood or a hurricane or tornado. And this came about due to severe flooding in the south part of our district a couple of years ago, and the discovery that FEMA, which is tasked with providing timely assistance, did not do that. And they sent in multiple recovery teams that lost paperwork in between time. It took a long time to get them the assistance they needed, and they needed to do better. So we introduced and passed the bill that is changing the way they deliver disaster assistance. We're keeping and making our nation safer, too. I passed a couple weeks ago a bill that was called the Safeguarding American Skies Act that allows our Homeland Security Border Patrol agents to interdict and to take out rogue drones that the drug cartels have been using to bring drugs across our southern border. And this is real important, too. I've also been a leader on tackling some of the issues facing us, such as sex trafficking and drug abuse. We passed a bill to allow our law enforcement officers to give them more resources to go after sex trafficking demand. Missouri does rank 16th in the number of sex trafficking cases, and it's just an unconscionable crime. And so now, if the Senate passes my bill, our law enforcement will have more resources that they need. And I started a Missouri Drug-Free Initiative, which has helped 5 of our counties form drug recovery courts. I've supported several bills in Congress that are now law, giving $10 billion more of funding for going after opioids, and I've held 13 high school assemblies challenging our young people to rise up and be the generation to live drug-free. We've also been focused on rural broadband, have a bill passed in the House in the Farm Bill version that will help get more resources to rural broadband. And I'm very active in pro-life and pro-gun, and just would be honored to continue to represent and fight for the good people of this area.
Now, you mentioned the Farm Bill there, and the Farm Bill is very important to people in this area. Now, Congress was unable to get a Farm Bill over the finish line last month. Do you see a way forward? If you were returned to office, would that happen again? Why did that happen to begin with? There are a lot of Missourians who are really, really upset about that.
Well, I am a member of the House Agriculture Committee, the only member of Missouri's congressional delegation there, a lifelong farmer myself. So I understand how important this bill is, and I do feel honored to be on the conference committee that is working to hammer out the differences between the House and the Senate version. Sadly, the reason I think we did not get this passed by September 30th was due to politics in the Senate. In the House, we passed our bill back in the summer, and we have been dedicated to getting this done on time. But I think in the Senate, the votes are a lot more narrow, and they're looking at this election, and the Democrats in the Senate have kind of been dragging their feet, unwilling to sit down and to talk about some of the differences and come to an agreement. But I think after the election is over, depending on the results, I'm hopeful that they'll be willing to sit down then over November and December and finalize this before the beginning of the year. If they are not, then we may be looking at a year or something extension, and would have to start over again next year, which I truly would be tragic. We have put so much work into this, and I've worked to make sure we have crop insurance and those crop protection risk management tools that are important to our farmers. We've got provisions in there helping livestock industry, funding a foot and mouth disease vaccine bank, which is something that's been needed for a long time. Like I mentioned, we have more funding for rural broadband, and I have amendments in there to make sure the speed is going to be adequate, and we expand it from loans to loan guarantees. But the nutrition title is something that we have differences with. the Democrats on. In our bill, we say if you're able-bodied adult receiving food assistance, we want to invest in you to give you the job training you need to help access one of the 7.1 million jobs available right now by participating in training 20 hours a week. And some individuals think that is onerous and don't like that provision, but it makes sense to me, to help invest in people, to help them get those skills so they can get a good paying job. So we'll see where we end up on that, but that's still something I think is very important.
Now, really quickly before I let you go, I want to ask you about another issue that's been really big on the ground here this year. The Trump administration's tariffs on a number of goods have resulted in, reciprocal tariffs put by China. And I was talking to a farmer just the other day who said that if things continue on the trend that they are now, he could lose $180,000. He says that $12 billion in surplus that the Trump administration is giving isn't enough, and he voted for Trump. He says that he has abandoned that now. What is your response to people like him?
Well, I understand the frustration and what he's feeling. I think overall most of the farmers are still supportive of Trump, but I think there will be a limit and a time where we need to have some resolution to this. But overall, most farmers understand that this is very important, that China has been taking advantage of us for a long time, not only in the agriculture sector, but in other areas. And nobody has stood up to them. And if we don't, they'll end up continuing to take advantage of us. And so they appreciate what the president's goals are. On my part, I have tried to be a very vocal advocate for the farmers in this area with the Trump administration, letting them know how important it is that we resolve this quickly, that we appreciate the goal. We want to have fair and free and open reciprocal trade with China and other countries, but we can only endure so much, and we need to get this resolved. And I'm pleased that we did get the NAFTA renegotiated, and it ended up opening up new ag markets for our especially dairy farmers with Canada, which many people thought that would never happen. And it was because of the tough stand that the president took that Canada finally backed down on that. And so I'm hopeful that we will see that ultimately with China as well, that they'll back down and they will agree to remove some of these unfair tariffs they have against us and to treat us fairly. And in the end, it'll be very positive for us.